Yeah, yo, what up, guys? So, I wanted to make like a quick sort of unscripted video where I explain the intricacies of the speedometer, like how to read it, trying to understand what your speed might be, since a lot of people tend to think the speedometer is useless or that it's just hard to understand. And I think that something like this would be quite helpful for people just wanting to improve their gameplay to a higher level and be able to notice when they're making mistakes or not, or the different areas where things are improved. And so I went to Tiger Temple, because Tiger Temple has been everything. So it should make it pretty easy to be able to point out like different aspects of the speedometer. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is like basic. This is a very basic thing, but I think it's kind of important for people to be able to tell. So there are two fire levels that are really important to pay attention to: Sacred Fire and Yellow Fire, obviously. And then also what the needle looks like when you're both grounded and in the air. So this is what Yellow Fire looks like. I will flash this save just to keep myself from going down the hill, but you can see the needle is straight up. That is Yellow Fire. So whenever you see the needle straight up when you're grounded, that means you are going at the base Yellow Fire speed. Now if I add a jump, where that needle is right there, about, I don't know what degrees that would be, like, not about, it was like 35 degrees or something. But when the needle is like that, that's when you know you have base Yellow Fire speed in the air. And then we'll go to Sacred Fire. So that's what the needle looks like when you have Sacred Fire speed grounded with no SGs or anything. So you'll see that it is a similar style as Yellow Fire Airborne, where it's like in between. And then when you're when you go airborne, you'll see it go straight up. And this means that you have basic Sacred Fire speed airborne. So they're kind of like inverted, Yellow Fire and Sacred Fire. You're not really going to be needing Yellow Fire too much, so really you could just be acquainted with the position of the speedometer with basic Yellow Fire, Sacred Fire, and airborne Sacred Fire. But those are like basic points for you to keep in your mind, because it can be, that's like the benchmark for like when you would stop frogging. Because generally speaking, you don't really want to froggy when you have just basic speed. Because if you don't have any SG at all, you're going to technically be losing time. Not a lot. It's not like you're going to be like costing a PB, but it's time loss that adds up over time. And so it's just good to be conscientious of it, kind of get in the habit of not spamming froggy when unnecessary. But yeah, like you can see when I'm froggying. Let me go to Sacred Fire so you can tell. But like you see when I'm froggying, when I have Sacred, the needle dipping below that point. That's bad. You don't really want to do that, because it's slow. Like if you froggy for a long period of time when you have no speed, or like no SG speed, you actually will just slow down gradually just because of like CTR stuff. I don't know. Yeah, so there's that. The basic points for you to be able to read on the speedometer for like reference points. Yeah, I think the next step with becoming acquainted with the speedometer is being able to tell how fast an SG is. Which the best like use of the speedometer, in my opinion, is being able to tell how good the SG is by how quickly the speedometer rises when you're going down a hill or like getting an SG. So you see the speedometer actually bumped up quite fast. Let me see if I can replicate that. Save this gone over. Yeah, see? It bumped up quickly. That was a slow one. I'll get to that next. But when the speedometer shoots up quickly, that is ideal. That means your SG accelerated very quickly and you got the speed as early as possible, and it also allows the SG to be as strong as possible. But this does have a side effect. I guess I can't really show that on this track, so I'll probably cut to a different track on like Rouge Tubes. But when the SG accelerates quickly, you generally have to start the froggy later to avoid sticky froggy, which is annoying to pay attention to, but you can avoid sticky froggies by being conscientious of the speedometer needle, how quickly it accelerates. Because the reason that you have to wait later is because you need to wait until your speed levels out. So where, like, it's reached its peak and it starts to die down, that's when you start frogging. And so because it accelerated faster, it's going to take longer for it to start decelerating because it's at such a high speed for a long period of time. So you have to wait longer. Now, if I get a slow example, please. There we go. Yeah. Well, that was a really bad one. That slowed a lot. But it's easier to see on a higher hill. Actually, I'll switch to Ruse Tubes real quick. Because Ruse Tubes is a great example of what delaying an SG really means, and like also being able to tell like the true effects of the slow and fast acceleration. You see, that was a slow acceleration there, so the SG was too weak. I would have reset if I would have. Drive down the hill. I accelerated slowly. So I got the SG at full strength, but I have to start the froggy earlier. I started it too early. So I had to like delay the jump so that I didn't get sticky froggy too bad. That's like an in-between, because it's not like too slow. Because that's not like the fastest acceleration, but that's not like the slow scale. That's the slow scale, so I had the froggy bit early. That's faster, so I have to wait longer. But you get the gist. You have to adjust how early you start frogging based on how fast the acceleration was. That was too early. You can frog too early. When I say like delay, it's not like a massive delay. So it might be hard to notice when you're like, you know, just starting out trying to learn this kind of approach, but it kind of builds into muscle memory over time. You just kind of see the speedometer and you just adjust. But yeah. Basically, TLDR, needle goes up fast acceleration. If you're going down a downhill, like a long one, delay the frogging a little longer. Needle spikes up slowly, that's a slower acceleration, means you would start frogging earlier to take advantage of the speed once it reaches the max speed. You really just have to practice it and develop it into a sort of intuition. Just experience will carry it. Alright, we'll go back to Temple. Actually, let's go to a propulsion track. Maybe caves. Let's do caves, actually. So, briefly, I want to talk about propulsions. There's not a whole lot to go over here, but I feel like if you're going to try pushing it to a higher level, this is a useful thing to know. Whoops, let me try that. Unpaused and failed to start this like a G. Yeah, so I'm going to use OMSG here. You can tell when a propulsion is good if the needle, assuming you're in Sacred Fire, if the needle spikes up. Let me pull out the cursor so I can show the movement. If you see, assuming the needle's right here to start, if you see it bounce up and then go back down to the original position it was in, that means the propulsion was good. That means you gained speed or preserved your speed, which is the ideal scenario for a propulsion, because then it honestly makes SGs a lot easier. So like that's what I tend to look for when I'm like doing an SG like this one. I really want the needle to be something like that. Unfortunately, I did not get an SG on landing. It's not weird, but because there's other aspects which are important for SGs. It's not just the speed of the propulsion, but yeah. So that's how you can kind of tell when an SG is good. And obviously, if you're in a practice mod, you can get that exact example through the the speed displayed here. Obviously, you can see the SG was fast, or rather, the propulsion was fast because it preserved my grounding speed. You can tell, real quick though, you can tell a propulsion was bad if the needle spikes slightly downwards, or it just spikes a lot downwards, but at that point you can kind of see it, like, in your cart movement. But yeah, so that's like the gist of what you can visibly see on the speedometer. You can also get a sense of how quickly the speed is dying down based on, I guess, how quickly the needle is going down. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But if it's spiking down quicker, the SG is going to die quicker, and you'll have to start frogging a bit earlier. So obviously you want to keep the needle as up as possible and make it so that it is, once it is starting to go down, that means your SG is already pretty weak as it is. But you want to make sure that it's slowing down as little as possible. Let's go back to Tubes, because I think this is a good track to kind of demonstrate the next section, which is context clues. Because obviously, once the needle is maxed out, you can't really use it too well. And so, at that point, you have to use context clues. And so, one that I think a lot of people don't recognize is actually the sound that the cart makes when it lands. So if you pay attention, when I start frogging here, it's making clunk sounds, right? Like a clank, 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 as the sound of the cart landing. There's like a softer version and a harder version. And you can actually, I think a good example of it is when I'm actually landing on this downhill. You could hear that was like a harsher clank versus if I get a good landing that accelerates immediately. I'm not getting one. I'm not going to yes. There. It was like a more muted landing. It did not sound as clanky. That is a good sound indicator that you had gotten a good SG. Now, I have theories as to why the sound is more muted, but that's not a thing worth talking about in this video, since that's just really speculatory. Also, 2340 start laps is good, but I'm gonna shut up for this end section and see if you guys can recognize the sound. But yeah, you could see visibly that was a very slow froggy, and you could hear the clanking. It's like the way that I think of this sound as I internalize it. It's like one sounds like metal landing, and one sounds like you're like kind of bouncing. That's how I would describe the difference. And like once you become aware of it, it becomes really like noticeable. And the sound of the bouncy landing becomes like so satisfying. Once you're aware of it, it's like the best sound in the world. It's like when you don't hear the clanking, you're like, oh, this shit is good, you know? Was he muted landing? muted jumps, muted jumps. Slower landing. Unfortunately, I lost the SG. I would have liked to have seen what that lap could have been. But, you know, you pay attention to it, to the sound of your landings, whether you're just driving off the edge or landing from a jump, you'll start to notice you're losing speed. If you like, it's easier to notice when you're watching back the video at first, or like when you're in the practice spot, you can see, you get that visual of like, this is your speed more like accurately. And so when you're practicing or when you're watching back your PBs to find flaws, I would recommend listening to the audio if it has, the video has it. If your video doesn't have game audio, I would recommend having it on, because honestly, this is one of the most valuable audio cues in the game for like really trying to figure out spots of timeliness. And yeah, and some other cues which are kind of more obvious, but I feel like people don't really think of or like try to utilize, is using the environment as a cue of your speed. So if, say, like if you're, you know, aware of how the environment is moving past you when you know it's really fast, it's like you kind of can get a sense of how good the SG is. It's like if you know how many jumps you should be taking, if you know how fast that the walls should be moving past you, then you can tell when it's not as good or when it's better than average. And so like I can see that this was, without even having to look at the speedometer, I could tell that that was not optimal, because it felt like the uphill ahead was coming at me slower than it should have. Because it's like, after a while, you kind of get a sense of like, how many jumps should I be doing? The jumps will vary in height and stuff, and so you're not going to get the exact same amount of jumps, but you can kind of get a feel for how long it should be taking. So that can be a helpful word. And then like, one more thing that I'm sure you might have noticed at times, like when I was doing Temple, there's like a difference when you land between 2 wheels and 4 wheels. The wheelie, you can notice I'll always get a slow acceleration. And there I landed on 4 wheels and I accelerated immediately. That is a very important factor. That was a weird landing. That's an important factor to pay attention to. I'm sure a lot of people might feel the effects, but they might not have noticed that the wheelie animation is what is to blame. But it's good to be aware, because if you see that it happens in PB, well, you know then that if it was on a downhill anyways, doesn't really matter if you're not trying to get an SG, but if you were getting an SG and you noticed you got a 2-wheel landing or a wheelie, well, that's a point of improvement. But yeah, basically, what I have to say at the end of the day is you have to learn how to understand your speed and like be able to read the quality just by experience. You just have to play the game and practice it a lot, and then you kind of just develop this natural intuition through like the different context clues and being able to read the speed that the speedometer needle is moving at. And by learning what a good outcome looks like, you naturally start to be able to tell when it's not the exact good outcome. Yeah, that's really the meat of it. I don't know if this was super quick, as if I cut this down, it'll probably be like 12 minutes is my guess. But yeah, that's about all of the things that I have to say about the speedometer. If any of you have questions, I will always be happy to answer. And if you want to ask questions in like the time trial Discord or whichever Crash speedrunning Discord you happen to be in, everyone will be happy to answer if they obviously have the answer. This is kind of a more niche topic, and so like I feel like a lot of people don't actually know about this, like how to properly read the speedometer. And I feel like top players just kind of figured it out intuitively and weren't necessarily taught, because like I wasn't taught this at all. I just knew through playing the game for years, and I just kind of deduced it myself. But to save newer players time, or players who are just trying to push into a higher level of play, to save them time, I made this video just to kind of point it out immediately, so then you can become aware of it early on and just build it into your muscle memory. And you will likely find that you'll notice a lot of improvement points, either through watching your PBs or other people's runs, or even while you're playing. That's the best. That's when you know you're in the best position, is when you can notice the stuff on the fly. When you're playing and you can recognize this SG was bad, this frogging was good, this wasn't as fast as it could have been, all that stuff. When you can recognize that on the fly, that's when you know you're thinking like a top level player. So yeah, that's about all I have to say. Thanks y'all for watching.